And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord with such devotion, you get into the kingdom of God.
Text 56, chapter 18. Sarva karmanyapi sada kurvano madhyapashrayah mad prasadadavapnoti shashvatam padam avyayam. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee under my protection reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. That's nice. 57. Chetasa sarva karmani mai sanyasya matpadaha buddhi yogam upasritya majtata satatam bhava. In all activities just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service be fully conscious of me. 58. Majtata sarva durgani mat prasada tarishyasi atachetam ahankara nashroshashi vinangshasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. 59. Yadahankaram ashritya nayotsya iti manyase mityaisha vyavasayaste prakritistam nayokshiti. If you do not act according to my direction and do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare. Text 60. Svabhava jena kanteya nibadha svena karmana kartum nechasi yanmohat karishyasya vashopitat. Under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti. 61. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudhani maya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Text 62. Tam eva sharanam gacha sarva bhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim sthanam prapsya sishashvatam. O sign of Bharat, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Text 63. Adite jnanam akyatam guyat yuyataram maya vimrishyaitara sheshena yatejasi tatakaru. Thus I have explained to you the most confidential of all knowledge. Deliberate on this fully, and then do what you wish to do. Text 64. Sarvaguyatamam bhuya shrinu me paramam vachaha ishtosi me dritam iti tato vakshami hehitam. Because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you the most confidential part of knowledge. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. Suspenseful, he's getting ready to speak the most confidential knowledge. We'll go back to text 54. We'll read the translation and purport. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. Very, how do you say, important text that we've covered tonight and tomorrow night especially. There's a couple shlokas that are like the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, the conclusion that Krishna is building to, which he says the most confidential, which he says many times, confidential knowledge, more confidential, most confidential. So, text 54. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Purport. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahma-bhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in a state of liberation, called Brahma-bhuta. oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor, yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the Absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He is just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he is naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or gain because he is full in service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment because he knows that every living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world someone as higher and someone as lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral. The devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, stone and gold are of equal value. This is the Brahmabhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. And the idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes phantasmagoria, and the senses are like broken serpent's teeth. As there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth, so there is no fear from the senses when they are automatically controlled. The world is miserable for the materially infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha, or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. Shri Gaura Nitai Ki Jai. So this is very significant. Prabhupada's describing how when one comes to the spiritual platform of existence, he sees all living entities equal. So then he quotes here, which is referring to a verse from the Brahma Samhita, that devotee, he sees the highest person in this material world no better than an ant, no more significant than an ant. So Lord Brahma prays to Krishna and the Brahma Samhita, saying that from the highest living entity, such as Brahma himself, down to the little ant, specifically the Indragopa, the little tiniest organism, all are suffering actions and reactions, they're bound to their karma. So the devotee who's attained the spiritual platform, who's beyond the actions and reactions of the material world, can clearly see this. So whether one is rich and famous, whether one is, the president, the, big politician, whatever position they may be, the devotee can see right through the facade of the material covering and see that this is a living entity in a particular position, and he is just dealing with action and reaction, his karma. So, how to get to this spiritual realization, to have this vision, is a natural question, a natural thing to follow. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in the first purport, he's talking about the impersonalist. And the impersonalist, to attain this Brahmabhuta stage, the goal is to become one with the Supreme. Essentially, get rid of the ego completely. The sense of self is the poison of this world, and we have to get rid of this and see that everything is just one with God. Everything is emanating from God. And once you get rid of that illusion of separateness, then you will be free from all miseries and problems. But Srila Prabhupada's mentioning here that a devotee, simply just by rendering devotional service, comes to this state of oneness with the Lord. And where did he say? He said that in that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman in this entirety and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish. Why is it hellish? Because if I were to annihilate my identity in lieu of merging with this oneness, then there's no question of love. There's no question of relationship. It's just existence. And from a higher sense, the Vaishnavas, they describe that this is born of a material desire, where we're suffering in the material world and we're trying to negate our problems by this spiritual suicide, that we get rid of our independence, because all our independence, all we know is suffering. So we think to negate suffering, I'll get rid of myself. Whereas the devotees are simply engaged in rendering service to the Lord, which is filled with ever-increasing pleasure, ever-increasing rasa. Rasa means like loving exchanges. So this is really the juice of life, these loving exchanges. And we can get a tiny glimpse of this in this material world and see that material objects, they have no value, really. All the money in the world you can get, you still will not be satisfied. You can go visit all the most beautiful beaches in the world, still not satisfied. My Guru Maharaj, he told a story one time. He was he's in Europe, you know, it's just like before he became a devotee. And he saw on the sign, like a big billboard. I forget where it was, but, you know, come visit the Bahamas. Nice, you know, sunny beach, all, you know, sun, drinks, all these things. She said, okay, that's nice. And then he went there and he went to the Bahamas or wherever it was on the beach. And he goes there and he's sitting out on a chair on a beach, and immediately scorpions start climbing on him and crawling on him. So he's okay, let me get up from here. Let me go in the water at least. I'm all the way here. And he starts to go swimming, and some guy comes up and he's like, no, you can't go swimming now. He's like, why? You know, it's nice water. It's like, no, it's high tide. When it's high tide, the water's higher and the sharks, they come over the reef. When it's low tide, the sharks go back out so they don't come to the beach. Then you could go swimming. So he's like, okay, I stay on the beach and I get attacked by scorpions. I go in the water, I get attacked by sharks. And then he said he was walking around and he looked up and he saw a billboard and it was like, come visit Europe, you know, get away from here and go visit. Well, this is the material world. We're in one place and we're led this idea, where you're at's not great. And if you just went there, it will be a dream come true. And once you get there, problems. And I was hearing from him recently, actually, and he was describing the point of these vacations is that you get a break from your little house and your little life, and you go to a place and you face all these different struggles and challenges so that you're actually more eager to go back to your home so you can continue this illusion of trying to enjoy. So this is the material world. We're always let this lie. But as a devotee takes up devotional service to the Supreme Lord, immediately he comes to this state of oneness. And oneness does not mean giving up our identity altogether. Some spiritually minded people mention the idea of killing the ego, right? Ego is evil. But devotees, we recognize the true ego. And we recognize the false ego. The false ego is this material covering, this false designation that we place on ourselves. This, I am a man, I am from America, I speak this language, I think like this, I act like this, I'm good at this skill, I play this, I do that. So many different designations that we accept, and they're all temporary. And we learn from the Vedic scriptures and from the sadhus who are living those scriptures what the true ego is. Who knows what the true ego is? Servant. Do you know any shlokas that support this? There's a famous... That's good. Yeah, that is good. It's also from the CC, but there's another one from the CC. I don't know the whole thing, but Jivera Srupahoy Krishna Natyadas means the constitutional position of the jiva is to be a servant of Krishna. So by nature, all living entities are subordinate to God. and we can try our hardest to forget God, to forget Krishna, and try to enjoy on our own. And this leads to frustration. I think Prabhupada mentioned something in this purport about that, but oh yeah, this part that he mentioned was really nice. He said, he's talking about all these higher and lower positions in the material world as being ephemeral. And a devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. So when we accept the false ego, we're completely enamored with these ephemeral appearance and disappearances. I want this, and if I had this faculty of life, if I had this big house, if I was married to this person, if I had this job, everything will be great. But it's all temporary and subject to be taken from us at any moment. Whereas a devotee is simply happy with his devotional service. Unfortunately, we can render devotional service any place, any time, unhindered. Devotional service can never be checked by any kind of material encumbrances. And we may think, oh, what if I'm like paralyzed in bed and sick in the hospital? What can I do then? Still, we can do worship in our mind. There's always some kind of devotional service that we can do, and naturally, the pure devotee, his heart essentially is just beating the Maha Mantra. He doesn't really have to try. It's just naturally going towards Krishna. So this is what we're striving for. And since we're not perfect and we're conditioned to the material world, then we have to practice. And what does this practice look like? We have to wake up early when we don't want to. We have to come to the temple, worship the deities, face the dictates and challenges of our mind, face the cold, face the heat. And we have to do this regularly. Otherwise, it's all too easy to cave into the mind. I could sit here and say for lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, our mind has been telling you like this, but we don't have practical realization of what we did in previous lifetimes. But we do have practical realization of what we've done in this life and how much our mind just tells us, go here, go there, do this, don't do that. This sucks, leave here. This is great. I want this. And it gets us in trouble, just oscillating constantly. So as we approach the absolute truth and have a foundation of knowledge that supports that and how to approach that and how to endeavor successively in approaching that, then we should naturally put aside the dictates of the mind and start to follow that. And it can be very challenging because we sit one day and we have, this really nice realization or a nice inspiration that wants us to connect to God, to know God, to serve Krishna. But then we wake up and we come in the temple in the morning and we're like, oh, I don't know what to do. I just want to leave here, anywhere but here. I want to go. So we have to keep practicing in overcoming the mind. Because if we just give in every time the mind brings up some difficult situation and wants to run, what are we going to do? Where is that going to lead us? We've been doing that for so long, and where did it lead us? Obviously, everybody's sitting here and hearing from the Bhagavad Gita because they weren't getting what they really needed in the material world. Even if somebody comes from a very pious background and they want to hear Krishna's message of the Bhagavad Gita, they're not getting that fulfillment from the material world. Why? Because it's simply not there. Simply not there. There's no lasting happiness in material pursuits. So then we're interested in spirituality, something more, something higher, and then we're confronted with the challenges of the mind. The heart is like covered with dust, and as we start to clean the heart of all these impurities, we start kicking up all this dust, and it becomes very difficult to deal with. So we think, okay, I tried this and it's not working, so let me go back to what I was doing before, or let me try this, let me try that. But what good comes from anything if we don't see it all the way through, if we don't actually try hard? like I give the example of like an Olympic gold medalist, so many hours of training that they have to do to be able to be in that one position, to have this opportunity to perform, at their peak so they can win this medal, to win this accomplishment. And it's what? Just for like some name and fame where you get forgotten about and then people break your records and they give you this little piece of gold or silver or bronze. But what did Prabhupada say? He said, where did he say it? For him, stone and gold are of equal value. Name and fame, same thing. Who wants anything material because it's all ephemeral? So if so many people are willing to endeavor so much for such temporary benefits, why are we afraid to endeavor for something that's eternally benefiting us, that will never be taken away from us? This is Krishna's guarantee that whatever devotional service we do, it's eternally for our benefit. It'll never be taken away from us. So whatever we're doing and approaching God, approaching Krishna here in this life, it's your good fortune and it will always be there. But it's a progressive journey. And if we come in contact with the absolute truth now and deviate for whatever means, all of our problems are not magically going to go away. Eventually, we're going to have to deal with those same problems, whether it's in this life, later in this life, next life. But fortunate are the souls that are able to receive the mercy of the great devotees. By their blessings, by their mercy, and then all of our problems and difficulties we face can become greatly diminished by taking shelter of their lotus feet. But our tendency to not want to take shelter because this is another person. I want to be free. I know what's best for myself. I know what to do. This is what creates so much problems in life, because this is born of the false ego. False ego says, I'm great. I know what to do. I'll figure it out. Me. Aham mameti. Me, myself, and mine. So this is the problem of the conditioned soul, is we're seeing life in this context of aham mameti, me, myself, and I. So I could keep talking on this shloka and this purport. It's very nice, but many of these shlokas are very nice. Specifically, the next one I'd like to read. It's very, very, very special shloka. 655. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service, and when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his plenary portions cannot be understood by mental speculation, nor by the non-devotees. If anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has to take the pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. It is already stated, Naham Prakasha, that he is not revealed to everyone. Everyone cannot understand God simply by erudite scholarship or mental speculation. Only one who is actually engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service can understand what Krishna is. University degrees are not helpful. So, this reminds me of when I first read Srila Prabhupada's books. I was struck with this realization that God is real, God is everything, and what's the point of doing anything else if it's not connected to serving God? Because that's the highest truth. What is this? It's confusing me if I go in circles. Yeah. Anyways, when I first read Srila Prabhupada's book, I was struck with this dawning that, okay, if God is really there, then what's the point of doing anything else? Because God is the source of everything. So why not just give everything to him? And I broke my train of thought. Okay. So I thought I wanted to go like on the streets and like kind of like shake people, like, what are you doing? Wake up. Why are you wasting your life? Serve God. Because it was so clear. But why was it so clear? Prabhupada made the point that it has to be understood under the guidance of a pure devotee. So whatever realization I had simply was not by my own merit. It was only there because I came in contact with a pure devotee of the Lord. So there's many, many, many versions of the Bhagavad Gita, many translations, and many people read it and interpret it in different ways and simply just read it and put it on the bookshelf in their section of nice wisdom, but not essentially the absolute truth. But when people heard Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, immediately you can understand that this material world has nothing to offer. There's no pleasure, there's no satisfaction, and service to God is really the only thing that will bring fulfillment in life. And this is what we've always been seeking. This is what we will always seek, and the soul will always be hankering after this, or otherwise will never be fulfilled. And to what degree we actually give ourselves to God fully to serve Krishna, that to that degree will be fulfilled. Krishna says, Ye yatamam prapadyante tams the time of bhajamyaham. He reciprocates according to our surrender. So if we really want to know Krishna, then we have to show him that that's what we really want. And, coming up to the temple, showing up, this is a good first step, but one could be within the walls of the temple, but their mind is still elsewhere. So to bring the mind and consciousness here in alignment with what we're doing, and it takes humility to actually confront what this process is and really ask questions from a platform of trying to understand in a submissive way. And why does that take humility? Because if I ask a question that I get definitive knowledge that slashes through my doubts and my misconceptions, then all of a sudden I become convinced that, maybe these guys are right. Maybe I have to surrender to God. Maybe there is no happiness outside of devotional service, and that can be very confronting. So to somebody who's resisting, that's unpalatable and it seems difficult, but once one actually accepts that, that becomes the sweetest taste. And I remember one time I was in Houston, His Holiness Keshav Bharati Maharaj, he was preaching to this newcomer. It's kind of a traveler person, a seeker, traveling around the country, seeking different things. And he was preaching to him, and he was preaching pretty heavy and bringing up all these points of the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavatam, and it was like really heavy of like, Krishna, God, surrender, this is the only thing that's going to bring happiness. And then for him, you could see like, it was like heavy, and he was just sitting there like, and all the devotees were sitting around just like, like drinking up nectar, like they were like, wow, this is awesome. So from a devotee's perspective, who's actually crossed over accepting the reality that God is there and only by serving him will be happy, then to hear such comments and statements becomes very palatable and enjoyable. But to somebody who's stuck in the false ego, stuck in the mind, who's resisting to give up independence to know God, it becomes very fearful and frightening. But we can never give up our independence. We will always remain independent. Even if we all have the same exact haircut and wear the same color clothes, sing and dance the same way, always you will be independent, I will be independent. We will have our own personality. That will never go away. And that's the whole point. And that's what Krishna said to Arjuna. He said, if you don't fight, you will be engaged in warfare because that is your nature. So we have our own nature, and the whole purpose of this human life is to use our nature in service of Krishna, to glorify Krishna. In this way, we become joyful. The whole world becomes joyful. So it's a very nice thing. I'll continue this purport. One who is fully conversant with the Krishna science becomes eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom, the abode of Krishna. Becoming Brahman does not mean that one loses his identity. Devotional service is there. And as long as devotional service exists, there must be God, the devotee, and the process of devotional service. Such knowledge is never vanquished even after liberation. Liberation involves getting free from the concept of material life. In spiritual life, the same distinction is there. The same individuality is there, but in pure Krishna consciousness. One should not misunderstand that the word vishate, or enters into me, supports the monist theory that one becomes homogeneous with the impersonal Brahman. No, vishate means that one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in his individuality to engage in his association and render service unto him. For instance, a green bird enters a green tree not to become one with the tree, but to enjoy the fruits of the tree. Impersonalists generally give the example of a river flowing into the ocean and merging. This may be a source of happiness for the impersonalist, but the personalist keeps his personal individuality like an aquatic in the ocean. We find so many living entities within the ocean. If we go deep, surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. One must have complete knowledge of the aquatics living in the ocean depths. So this is a great analogy about the rivers merging into the ocean. Certain spiritual people, they'll say, all paths lead to the same place. So it doesn't matter which path you take, as long as you follow your heart, follow, your inner guidance. Eventually, we're all going to end up to the same place. Just like all rivers on the surface of the earth are running down the hills and mountains by gravity and coming into the ocean. The same ocean is all one big body of water, even though we label it different ways. So Prabhupada's making a point that within that ocean, there's many living entities that are residing within the ocean, but remaining individual. But if you look on the surface of the ocean, you don't see so much. So he says one must go deep. And this is a very nice point because a lot of people in this modern times kind of bite and nibble at different spiritual paths. They take a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they take everything that they like and they reject the things that they don't like. But this is very hard to go beyond the surface because we're just staying on the surface and taking what we like and rejecting what we don't like. And what is the nature of the mind? Accepting and rejecting. So we're staying on the mental platform, on the material platform, and we're picking the things we like and rejecting the things we don't like. But to go deep means fully go deep. And if you go deep in any one of these paths, you will immensely learn so much more than just skimming on the surface of them all. But within this Bhakti Yoga traditions, through our parampara, giving this knowledge coming from Lord Krishna down to Lord Chaitanya, very easily, just by hearing within a few days, we can see the vast depth of this knowledge and this practice. And if one commits to this practice, then that knowledge is realized from within. And how is that knowledge realized? Well, in this very shloka here, Krishna says one can understand the Supreme Personality is only by devotional service. So, Ayanja Prabhu, he would say something very nice I like a lot, actually. He'd say that these books that we have, Prabhupada's purports, they're all there just to convince us that when we're standing in front of the deities, we should just be singing and dancing, chanting and dancing. Because we're so material and unfaithful and, not simple. We have so many different ideas of what to do for happiness. But we read these books and we be convinced, oh yeah, Krishna's there. Devotional service is the way to know him. So if I do something for him, he'll be pleased. So simply, we stand in front of the deities, we chant nicely, we dance nicely. And that extends to all facets of devotional service. But this is how he shared it. So devotional service is the way to know Krishna. And by our endeavor in that devotional service, free from our own desire for selfish gains and our humble attempt to please Guru and Krishna, then Krishna becomes very pleased. And in one sense, this is like a mystical thing that, God is way up there and we're this tiny little thing here. And if we do some service, then he magically becomes pleased and, but we can view it just with any person that we've ever experienced in life. You go out of your way to do something for somebody, or you ask how their day went or compliment them, and naturally, it touches their heart or it touches our heart and you feel endeared to them. And naturally, you hold them more dear and it's like, it's like, wow, I owe this person, or that person, who complimented me or did some loving gesture towards me. Then the next time they do something that's totally like horrible, I don't mind, because it's like, oh yeah, I love that person. So simply when we're going out of our way to please Krishna, Krishna becomes very pleased and he'll overlook a lot of our nonsense and help us get rid of the nonsense. But if we're just trying to study the books and figure it out and, be really intellectual and figure out life, it's very, very difficult. Many scholarly people study actually our whole Gaudiya tradition, and they study it from a perspective of like a scholarly perspective, and they know more about Lord Chaitanya than you and I know about. But it doesn't lead them to devotional service because they're just studying it as a great personality. They're not studying it from the perspective of devotional service. And Prabhupada, he makes the point that a person can come in contact with the devotees and come to the temple and day one give up illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, gambling. Whereas people, they can study all the books they want, but it's very difficult to overcome these things. So Krishna's blessings are there. We just simply have to be open to it. So I could keep talking, or I don't know, there's a few minutes. If anybody has any comments or questions, yes.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, thank you for a nice class. I had a question about something you said. It was about how this desire to become one with Brahman is born out of material desires. I found that really fascinating because when we're born, we share the qualities of we share the qualities of that which we're born from or who we're born from. Like materially speaking, we share the qualities of our parents. And though the soul is never actually born, from my understanding, it was created or could have been created. Or there's, we share the qualities of ultimately the whole being his parts. We have Satchit Ananda.
Yes, that's a safe way to say it.
So how are we to understand when you say becoming one with Brahman is born of material desires? Because the Brahman platform is transcendental. It's above material. So like how, if it doesn't share the qualities of, how can material desire take one to the transcendental platform?
Some people approach spiritual life thinking that it's approaching it from this platform of our material conditioning. So as we're following this process as given by the Guru Parampara, we're following the process of descending knowledge, which is Shabda. How do you say? Shabda Praman, it's revealed knowledge that's coming from beyond this material world. And if we simply open our mind to it, open our hearts to it, then we can access that same divine knowledge. But some spiritualists, take up a spiritual path, and it's more of an ascending process. And their approach of understanding spirituality means a negation of material life. So if I have an individuality here and, I'm limited by these things, so then therefore there I must be not limited, and the individuality, the persona is the thing that's limiting me. So if I get rid of that false persona, then there's nothing, and then that's actually freedom, that's liberation. So it's a negation of life's miseries and problems rather than embracing real life. So it's not a positive, whereas devotional service is a positive because it's, what do I do? And I mean, I have practical experience of this. It's a long story, but realizing the potency of Srila Prabhupada's books and what is there in his purports, and seeing that my whole material life was, illusion and pretty much demoniac and not good. And then I wanted to renounce it all. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. That's not good. That's not good. And I didn't want to do anything because I could see it's all evil. It's all negation. Well, what do I actually do? So I was never able to learn that until I met the devotees who are actually engaged in what you actually do. And that's coming through, like what Prabhupada said, following the guidance of a pure devotee. So the Guru teaches the process of devotional service so that we can practice that devotional service of loving Krishna. And by practicing devotional service under the instruction of the spiritual master, then this shloka comes alive. That we're rendering devotional service and Krishna's pleased, and that way he is known, so he starts to reveal himself. So instead of it being a negation of don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, it's no, we know exactly what to do. We know who God is, we know what his name is, what his address is, how to reach him, how to contact him, and then we start engaging those activities. And at first, it might not be done out of love. It's a great experiment. In the previous purport, Prabhupada said somewhere like, what was the word? He used gosh, something. Where is it? Anyways, I don't see it, but he says that he says that it's Naham Prakash, that it's not revealed to everyone. So, at that same time when I was saying I read Prabhupada's books and I just wanted to like run around and like shake people, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you wasting your life? Turn to God. I realized that God is an open secret. Krishna is an open secret. It's open secret. It's available to everybody, but it's hidden. And what's the qualification for it not to be hidden? Huh? Sincerity, but desire. We can get out of this material world simply by desiring to get out of the material world. Really, that's all that it comes down to. But we desire to stay here. We're attached to suffering. We're attached to being stuck in these cycles and these changing bodies and, the hopes for pleasure and name and fame. And, we're attached to things that are only temporary. So it's always transient. So we're always disappointed, but we're attached to the hope that, I'll find it here. So Maya is not actually gripping onto us. We're holding onto Maya. So simply by desiring, we can do that. So to do that, we have to come into the positive and not just the negation. So yeah, that's a few thoughts on that point. Okay, it's time. We can end here. Thank you everybody for participating. Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Shri Gauranatai ki jai. Vansha Kalpatarubhyas cha Kripasindhibhyo cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Golo Kara Premadana. Nama